The condolence letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, official Marine Corps letterhead bearing the weight of finality. Captain Raven Ghost Blackwater had been declared missing in action, presumed dead after her AH-1Z Viper disappeared into the mountains of northern Afghanistan during a routine patrol. The letter, addressed to her next of kin, spoke of honor, sacrifice, and the grateful nation she died serving. Command had already begun the paperwork to reassign her quarters. What they didn't know was that Ghost was very much alive, carrying Corporal Martinez on her back through 12 miles of Taliban-controlled territory, his shattered leg leaving a trail of blood in the snow. Her Viper lay in twisted metal at the bottom of a ravine, victim to an RPG that had come from nowhere in the pre-dawn darkness. The explosion had killed her gunner, Lieutenant Torres, instantly. The impact had thrown Ghost clear, conscious but broken, watching her bird burn while enemy voices echoed off the canyon walls. She'd found Martinez 3 clicks from the crash site, the sole survivor of an IED blast that had claimed his entire squad. His radio was dead, his leg mangled, and his eyes held that particular emptiness that comes when a Marine realizes he might not make it home. Ghost had looked at this kid, maybe 22 years old, and made a promise that would define the next 72 hours of hell. "We're walking out of here, devil dog," she'd whispered, fashioning a splint from debris in her own flight suit. "Together." The mountains of Afghanistan are unforgiving in winter, but they're nothing compared to the rage of a Marine pilot who refuses to let another Marine die on her watch. Ghost had earned her call sign not for stealth, but for her ability to appear where others couldn't survive. She'd flown rescue missions in weather that grounded entire squadrons, landed in hot zones that veteran pilots wouldn't touch, and brought home Marines that other commanders had written off as casualties of war. Now, as she half-carried, half-dragged Martinez through terrain that would challenge a fully equipped infantry unit, something primal drove her forward. It wasn't training or duty or even survival instinct. It was the unbreakable bond between Marines, forged in fire and tempered by loss. Behind them, the mountains held their secrets. Ahead lay 30 miles of enemy territory, 3 Taliban checkpoints, and a base that believed they were both already dead. Ghost adjusted Martinez's weight on her shoulders and checked her compass one more time. The kid was unconscious now, which was probably a mercy. His breathing remained steady, and that was all that mattered. She had water for maybe 2 days, no food, and a sidearm with 14 rounds. The odds were impossible, but Ghost had built her reputation on making the impossible look routine. She took her first step into the unknown, carrying her wounded Marine toward a horizon painted in blood and determination. The radio silence from Outpost Bravo had lasted exactly 37 hours when Colonel Marcus Webb received the surveillance footage that would change everything. The grainy infrared images from a Predator drone showed 2 figures moving through the coast mountain range, one carrying the other in what appeared to be a fireman's carry. The thermal signatures were human, American based on their equipment patterns, and moving with purpose toward friendly lines. "Could be our missing pilot," Intelligence Officer Major Kane suggested, studying the footage on the command center's main display. "Timeline matches the crash site coordinates." Webb shook his head, dismissing the possibility with the confidence of a man who'd seen too many wars. Captain Blackwater went down in Viper territory. No one survives a night in those mountains, let alone 3 days carrying wounded. These are probably friendlies from another unit. But something about the lead figure's movement pattern nagged at Kane. The way they navigated terrain, the efficient economy of motion, the stubborn persistence through conditions that would break most soldiers. He'd reviewed Ghost's service record earlier that morning while processing her casualty report. Decorated combat pilot, 3 tour, known for impossible rescues. Her psychological profile noted an almost pathological inability to abandon fellow Marines. "Sir, recommend we maintain surveillance and prepare extraction teams," Kane pressed. "If there's even a chance." "Major, I've already signed the casualty reports and notified next of kin," Webb interrupted. Captain Blackwater is KIA, and whoever those individuals are, they'll reach base on their own or they won't. We don't waste resources chasing ghosts." The irony of the statement wasn't lost on Kane, but he kept his thoughts to himself. Command had a way of making pragmatic decisions that felt hollow when Marines were involved. He made a mental note to keep monitoring the drone feeds, unofficial though it might be. 40 miles away, Ghost felt the first edge of hypothermia creeping into her extremities. Martinez had regained consciousness twice in the past 6 hours, each time asking if they were close to base, each time accepting her lie that they'd be there soon. The truth was more complicated. They'd covered maybe 8 miles in 2 days, avoiding Taliban patrols and navigating terrain that seemed designed to kill the unwary. Her left shoulder, dislocated in the crash, sent fire through her chest with each step. The makeshift sling she'd fashioned from paracord was cutting off circulation to her arm, but stopping to adjust it meant putting Martinez down, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to pick him up again. So she kept walking, one foot in front of the other, navigating by stars and stubbornness. "Ghost," Martinez whispered during one of his lucid moments, "leave me. You can make better time alone." She'd heard those words before from other wounded Marines in other impossible situations. Her response was always the same. "We leave together or we die together, devil dog. No other options." The mountains stretched endlessly ahead, indifferent to their struggle, holding secrets that would soon shake the foundations of everything Command thought they knew about impossible. Lieutenant Sarah Chen was monitoring routine communications traffic when the fragmentary transmission crackled through the radio static at 3:47 hours. 3 words, barely audible through the atmospheric interference, but clear enough to make her sit up straight in her chair. Chaos 6, this is Ghost Rider 7, Marines, coordinates. The transmission cut off into static, lost in the electronic noise that plagued mountain communications. Chen immediately began cycling through frequencies, trying to reestablish contact, but found only silence. She checked her logs. Ghost Rider 7 had been Captain Blackwater's call sign. According to official records, Ghost Rider 7 had been declared destroyed 78 hours ago. Chen stared at her communications board, mind racing through possibilities. Equipment malfunction, atmospheric bounce, or maybe someone playing with old call signs. But something about the transmission felt authentic, desperate even. The voice had carried that particular strain that comes from extended stress and physical exhaustion. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she called to the night watch supervisor, "I need you to hear something." Rodriguez ambled over with the casual indifference of a Marine who'd seen too many false alarms during night watches. Chen replayed the captured transmission, watching his expression change from boredom to sharp attention. "Run it again," he ordered. They listened to the 3-word fragment 5 more times, each replay revealing new details. Background noise suggested movement, possibly over rough terrain. The voice quality indicated handheld radio, probably emergency frequency. Most importantly, the stress patterns in the transmission matched psychological profiles of Marines under extreme duress. "Sergeant, Ghost Rider 7 has been listed as KIA for 3 days, Chen pointed out, consulting her logs. "I know what the logs say, Lieutenant. I also know what I'm hearing." Rodriguez reached for his secure phone, connecting to the operations center. "This is night comms. We need to speak with the watch officer immediately." While Rodriguez made his call, Chen continued scanning frequencies, hopping to catch another fragment. She'd been monitoring communications for 2 years, long enough to distinguish between atmospheric anomalies and authentic transmissions. This felt real, urgent, and impossibly alive. 30 miles northeast of the base, Ghost was discovering that her emergency radio had exactly 47 seconds of battery life remaining. The impact from the crash had damaged the power supply, and she'd been nursing it along for 3 days, using it sparingly to send position updates that might or might not be reaching friendly forces. Martinez was unconscious again, his breathing shallow but steady. They'd made good progress through the night, following a dried riverbed that provided concealment and easier movement. Dawn would bring new challenges. Taliban patrols were more active in daylight, and their physical condition was deteriorating rapidly. Ghost checked her compass and estimated their position. Maybe 25 miles from base, if her navigation was accurate. The radio crackled to life one final time, and she pressed the transmit button with fingers that could barely feel the metal. The mountains swallowed her words into silence, indifferent to the drama playing out in their shadows, where two Marines refused to surrender to the impossible. Major Kane sat in the intelligence briefing room at 600 hours, reviewing overnight communications intercepts when Lieutenant Chen knocked on his door. She entered carrying a digital recorder and an expression that suggested she wasn't here for routine business. "Sir, we captured a transmission last night that you need to hear," she said, placing the recorder on his desk. "Call sign Ghost Rider 7. Kane's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. "Ghost Rider 7 is dead, Lieutenant." "Yes, sir, that's what makes this interesting." Chen activated the recorder. The fragmentary transmission filled the small room with static and desperation. Kane listened once, then immediately played it again. His experience with communications intelligence told him this was authentic. The voice stress patterns, the background acoustic signatures, and the transmission characteristics all matched field conditions rather than studio reproduction. "How many intercepts?" Kane asked. "This is the only complete fragment, but we've detected possible weak signals on the same frequency for the past 2 days. Always brief, always cut off by atmospheric interference." Kane stood and walked to his wall map, studying the topographical features of northern Afghanistan. If Ghost was alive, she'd be somewhere in the coast mountain range, probably moving toward friendly lines. The terrain was brutal, complicated by Taliban patrol routes and weather conditions that challenged even well-equipped units. "Lieutenant, I want continuous monitoring on all emergency frequencies. If you catch anything else, anything at all, I want to know immediately." Kane paused, considering his next words carefully. "And Chen, this stays between us until we know more." After she left, Kane stared at the map for a long time, tracing possible routes from the crash site to base. The distances were staggering, the terrain impossibly difficult, especially for someone carrying wounded. But if anyone could make that journey, it would be Ghost. Her service record read like a catalog of impossible rescues and against all odds survival stories. He picked up his secure phone and dialed the Aviation Operations Center. "This is Major Kane, Intelligence. I need current weather and enemy activity reports for grid squares 41 RPR 67,834 through 41 RQR 12,847. The duty officer sounded puzzled. "Sir, that's a pretty large area. What's the operational context?" "Possible search and rescue. Classification TBD." While Kane waited for the intelligence package, Ghost was learning that hypothermia affects judgment long before it kills. She'd been walking in circles for 2 hours, her compass readings making no sense, the landscape appearing to shift and change when she wasn't looking directly at it. Martinez was completely unconscious now, his weight becoming impossible to manage with arms that no longer responded properly to her commands. She finally admitted defeat and set Martinez down in the shelter of a boulder outcropping, arranging their remaining gear to provide maximum warmth and protection. Her hands shook as she tried to activate the radio one last time, but the battery was completely dead. They were alone in the mountains, invisible to rescue forces, with no way to signal their position. Ghost looked at Martinez's pale face and made a decision that would define everything that followed. She would not let this Marine die alone in a foreign land. forgotten by the Corps that had trained them both to never surrender, never quit, and never leave a fellow Marine behind. Even if it meant dying beside him, she would keep her promise. The snowfall began just after dawn, each flake carrying the weight of destiny toward two Marines who refused to surrender to the statistics of war. Command Sergeant Major Patricia Iron Morrison had been processing casualty reports for 23 years when she received Captain Blackwater's file for final administrative closure. The paperwork was routine: personal effects inventory, next of kin notification confirmations, and final personnel record updates. But something in Ghost's service jacket made her pause and read more carefully. 3 combat tour, 47 successful rescue missions, 0 Marines left behind under her command. The psychological evaluation noted an exceptional bond with fellow Marines and resistance to accepting mission failure when friendly forces are at risk. Morrison had seen thousands of service records, but few with this particular combination of technical skill and personal commitment. She cross-referenced Ghost's file with current operational reports and found the anomaly immediately. Captain Blackwater's Viper had gone down during a support mission for a ground patrol that had been hit by an IED. The patrol's sole survivor was listed as missing, presumed dead. Corporal Jesus Martinez, age 22, hometown San Antonio, Texas. Morrison reached for her phone and dialed intelligence. Major Kane, this is Command Sergeant Major Morrison. I'm reviewing the Blackwater casualty file and have some questions about the associated ground unit casualties. Kane's voice sharpened with interest. What kind of questions, Sergeant Major? The kind that suggest maybe we're missing something important about what happened out there. 40 minutes later, Kane was sitting in Morrison's office, reviewing the complete file package. The timeline was compelling. Ghost's Viper had gone down approximately 3 kilometers from where Martinez's patrol had been hit. The overlap wasn't coincidental. If Ghost survived the crash, she would have found Martinez, Morrison stated with the certainty of someone who'd watched Marines operate for 2 decades. And if she found him alive, she'd never leave him behind. Kane nodded, thinking about the fragmentary radio transmissions and the mysterious thermal signatures moving through the mountains. Sergeant Major, hypothetically, could someone carry a wounded Marine through 30 miles of mountain terrain? Major, 3 months ago Captain Blackwater carried a wounded Afghan National Army soldier 6 miles through a firefight to reach a casualty collection point. Before that, she walked 8 miles with a dislocated shoulder to reach a downed aircrew. The woman doesn't know how to quit. Kane felt pieces of an impossible puzzle clicking into place. What would you recommend? Morrison's expression hardened with the resolve that had earned her the nickname Iron. I recommend we stop writing condolence letters and start organizing a search and rescue operation. Those Marines are out there, and they're fighting to come home. 28 miles northeast, Ghost was discovering that the human body has reserves that medical science doesn't fully understand. She'd been walking for 18 hours straight, carrying Martinez through terrain that challenged her basic understanding of physics and endurance. Her left leg was completely numb below the knee, her right shoulder had locked into position, and she could no longer feel her hands. But Martinez was still breathing, and that meant they kept moving. The snowfall had intensified, providing concealment but making navigation nearly impossible. Ghost was operating on instinct now, following drainage patterns and wind currents that suggested the general direction of friendly territory. Her survival training had covered situations like this theoretically, but theory felt inadequate when confronted with the reality of indefinite endurance over impossible distances. During one brief rest, Martinez stirred to consciousness and looked around with the confusion of someone surfacing from deep water. "Where are we, Ghost?" he whispered. "Almost home, devil dog," she lied with the confidence of someone who'd perfected the art of maintaining morale under impossible circumstances. Few more clicks. Martinez studied her face and nodded, accepting the lie because believing it was necessary for survival. They both knew the truth was more complicated, but sometimes Marines survive on carefully maintained fiction rather than harsh mathematics. Ghost adjusted her grip and stood, lifting Martinez with the mechanical precision of someone whose body was operating beyond conscious control. One foot in front of the other, navigating by stars and determination through mountains that held their fate in snow-covered silence. Colonel Webb was reviewing morning intelligence briefings when Major Kane entered his office without an appointment, carrying a thick file folder and wearing an expression that suggested important news. "Sir, we need to discuss the Blackwater situation," Kane announced, setting the folder on Webb's desk. Webb sighed with the weariness of a commander who'd handled too many personnel crises. "Major, Captain Blackwater is dead. We've processed the paperwork, notified next of kin, and moved on. What's to discuss?" Kane opened the folder and spread photographs across the desk, drone surveillance images showing two figures moving through the mountains, radio intercept transcriptions, and a detailed timeline analysis. "Sir, with respect, I don't think she's dead, and I think she's carrying Corporal Martinez." Webb examined the materials with the skeptical attention of someone who'd learned not to trust optimistic assessments in a combat zone. The drone images were compelling but inconclusive. The radio intercepts were fragmentary. The timeline analysis was based on assumptions rather than confirmed intelligence. "Major, even if these figures are American, which is questionable, the odds of survival in those conditions are essentially zero. Captain Blackwater went down in Taliban territory during a winter storm. No one, regardless of training or determination, could survive 3 days in those mountains while carrying wounded." "Sir, Command Sergeant Major Morrison has reviewed Ghost service record. She believes the captain could make this journey." Webb's expression hardened. Sergeant Major Morrison is emotionally compromised where her pilots are concerned. She's not making tactical assessments, she's hopping for miracles. Kane felt his frustration building but kept his voice professional. "Sir, request permission to organize reconnaissance flights over the suspected movement corridor. Low risk, high potential reward." "Permission denied, Major. We don't waste resources chasing phantoms." Webb gathered the photographs and handed them back to Kane. "Captain Blackwater is KIA, file closed." After Kane left, Webb stared out his office window at the flight line where Ghost's replacement pilot was already conducting pre-flight inspections on a new Viper. Command decisions sometimes required accepting losses and moving forward, even when intuition suggested other possibilities. He'd learned to trust statistics over sentiment, mathematics over hope. But something about Kane's presentation nagged at him, a small voice suggesting that maybe this time the impossible might be trying to become possible. 25 miles away, Ghost was learning that the final stages of hypothermia create a strange clarity of thought. Her physical systems were shutting down systematically, but her mental processes remained sharp, focused with the intensity of someone who'd moved beyond normal human limitations. Martinez had been unconscious for 6 hours, his breathing shallow but regular. Ghost had checked his pulse repeatedly, finding it weak but steady. As long as his heart kept beating, she would keep walking. The mathematics were simple even if the execution was impossible. She'd lost track of exact distance and time, navigating by instinct through landscape that seemed designed to confuse and disorient. The snowfall continued, erasing their tracks but also providing concealment from Taliban patrols. Each step required conscious effort now, her body operating on willpower alone. During a brief rest, Ghost activated her emergency beacon one final time, hoping the signal might reach friendly forces even though the battery was nearly dead. The device flickered once and went silent, leaving them truly alone in the mountains. But Ghost had made a promise to bring Martinez home, and Marines don't break promises to other Marines. She adjusted her grip, checked her compass one more time, and resumed walking toward a horizon that held either salvation or death, but definitely held the completion of her mission. The mountains watched in silence, indifferent to the drama of human determination playing out in their shadows. Captain Jennifer Torch Williams was conducting routine morning patrol when the glint of metal caught her attention through her Viper's targeting system. She was flying reconnaissance over the northern mountain ranges, officially searching for Taliban weapon caches, but everyone knew the real mission was maintaining presence in areas where American forces had been recently attacked. "Base, this is Torch 7, she radioed, circling for a better view. "I've got possible debris at grid 41 RQR 89624, requesting permission to investigate." The operations center responded immediately. "Torch 7, negative on investigation. Continue your assigned patrol route." But Williams couldn't shake what she'd seen: twisted metal that reflected sunlight in a pattern consistent with aircraft wreckage. She'd been flying combat missions for 3 years, long enough to recognize the signature of a downed helicopter. More importantly, she'd known Ghost personally, and the idea of leaving wreckage uninvestigated felt wrong. "Base, the debris field appears fresh. Could be related to recent enemy activity." A different voice came over the radio, Colonel Webb himself. "Torch 7, you are ordered to maintain your assigned patrol route. No deviations without express permission." Williams acknowledged the order but made a mental note of the coordinates. After completing her official patrol, she would find a reason to return to those coordinates, orders or no orders. Marines don't leave Marines behind, even when those Marines are twisted metal in mountain ravines. 2 hours later, Major Kane was monitoring communications traffic when Williams' earlier transmission caught his attention. He cross-referenced the coordinates with his map analysis and felt his pulse quicken. The debris field was exactly where Ghost's Viper should have crashed, and Williams had described it as fresh, meaning the wreckage was recent, visible, and worth investigating. Kane picked up his secure phone and dialed aviation operations. "This is Major Kane. I need to speak with Captain Williams immediately upon her return from patrol." 45 minutes later, Williams sat in Kane's office, studying the same maps and photographs that had been accumulating evidence of the impossible for 4 days. "Captain, what exactly did you see out there?" Kane asked. Williams chose her words carefully. "Definite aircraft wreckage, sir. Rotor system consistent with AH-1Z configuration. Impact pattern suggested controlled flight into terrain rather than catastrophic mechanical failure." Controlled flight into terrain was pilot terminology for a crash where someone was trying to land rather than simply falling out of the sky. It implied consciousness, intent, and possibly survival of the crash itself. "Any signs of personnel?" Kane pressed. "Negative, sir, but I was ordered not to investigate thoroughly." Williams paused, considering her next words. "Sir, if Ghost went down at that location, she might have survived the initial impact. The wreckage pattern suggests she maintained some control until the end." Kane felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. "Captain, hypothetically, if someone survived that crash, where would they go?" Williams studied the topographical map, tracing routes with her finger. "They'd head southwest toward friendly territory, probably follow this drainage system to avoid Taliban patrol routes. But, sir, it's 30 miles through some of the worst terrain in Afghanistan." Kane nodded grimly. 30 miles was exactly the distance his mysterious thermal signatures had been covering, one agonizing step at a time, through mountains that held secrets command wasn't ready to believe. The evidence was becoming impossible to ignore, even for skeptics trained to trust mathematics over miracles. Staff Sergeant Rick Bull, Henderson had been training new Marines in survival techniques when the call came through on his emergency radio. As the base's senior survival instructor, Henderson understood cold weather operations better than most, and he knew exactly what hypothermia sounded like over a radio transmission. "Base, this is any station, the weak voice crackled through static. Two Marines, grid approximately 41 RQR 157,489, require immediate assistance." Henderson grabbed his radio and responded immediately. "Station calling, this is base survival. Identify yourself." The transmission faded into static, leaving Henderson staring at his radio with growing excitement. He'd been monitoring emergency frequencies for 3 days, ever since rumors of possible survivors had started circulating among the enlisted personnel. This was the clearest transmission yet, and the voice carried the particular strain of someone operating at the absolute limits of endurance. Henderson immediately called Major Kane's office, but Kane was in meetings. He tried Command Sergeant Major Morrison and got her voicemail. Finally, in frustration, he called the operations center directly. "This is Staff Sergeant Henderson, survival training. I just received what appears to be an authentic distress call from two Marines in the northern mountains, requesting immediate search and rescue dispatch." The operations officer sounded skeptical. "Henderson, we're not currently conducting any SAR operations in that area. Are you certain of your intercept?" "Roger, sir. Professional assessment is that this transmission represents Marines in immediate danger, requiring emergency extraction." "Stand by, Henderson." 20 minutes later, Henderson was sitting in Colonel Webb's office, explaining his assessment to a room full of senior officers who were clearly struggling with the implications of his report. "Sergeant, what makes you so certain this transmission was authentic?" Webb asked. Henderson had prepared for this question. "Sir, I've been training Marines in survival for 8 years. The voice stress patterns, the specific terminology, and the tactical communication protocols all suggest authentic field conditions rather than simulation or deception." Webb studied the transcript Henderson had prepared. The coordinates placed them 23 miles from base, in Taliban-controlled territory. "Yes, sir, but they're moving toward friendly lines. Based on the transmission strength and quality, I estimate they'll reach the outer perimeter within 12 to 18 hours if they maintain current pace." Webb felt the weight of command decisions pressing down on him. Henderson was proposing that two Marines were walking home through impossible terrain, carrying their wounded, refusing to surrender to statistics that said they should already be dead. If it was true, they deserved rescue. If it wasn't, resources would be wasted chasing phantoms. But Marines don't abandon Marines, even when the mathematics seem impossible. "Henderson, organize a standby search and rescue team. Monitor all emergency frequencies. If you receive another transmission, I want immediate notification." 20 miles northeast, Ghost was discovering that human willpower has limits that even Marines occasionally encounter. She'd been walking for 4 days, carrying Martinez through terrain that challenged every assumption about possible versus impossible. Her body had moved beyond normal operational parameters into territory that medical science categorizes as shouldn't be functional. Martinez had regained consciousness twice in the past 6 hours, each time asking the same questions, each time accepting her reassurances that they were almost home. The truth was more complicated. They might be close to friendly territory, but close in mountain warfare is a relative concept that includes considerations of elevation, enemy activity, and weather conditions. Ghost checked her compass for the 1,000th time, trying to maintain accurate navigation despite exhaustion that made complex thinking nearly impossible. The snowfall had stopped, but temperatures remained well below freezing. Her emergency gear had been consumed or abandoned days ago, leaving them dependent on shared body heat and stubborn determination. She'd run out of water 12 hours ago, surviving on snow that provided moisture but leached crucial body heat. Food had been exhausted on day 2. The only thing keeping them moving was the promise she'd made to bring Martinez home, and Marines don't break promises to other Marines, even when keeping those promises requires moving beyond human limitations. During their next rest, Ghost tried her radio one more time, hoping for a miracle of battery life and signal strength. To her amazement, the device crackled to life with just enough power for one final transmission. She keyed the microphone and spoke into the mountain silence with the last of her strength, sending words toward home. Lieutenant Chen was monitoring emergency frequencies when the transmission came through with crystal clarity, stronger than any previous intercept. She immediately began recording while simultaneously alerting every senior officer on base. "Base, any station, this is Ghost Rider 7, the voice said, weak but unmistakably alive. 2 Marines, approximately 15 clicks northeast your position, moving toward friendly lines. Corporal Martinez requires immediate medical attention. We are combat effective and continuing to move." Chen's hands shook as she responded. "Ghost Rider 7, this is base communications. Confirm your identity and status." The reply came after a long pause, filled with the sound of wind and exhaustion. "Ghost Rider 7 is Captain Raven Blackwater, pilot, carrying Corporal Jesus Martinez from his patrol unit. We've been walking for 4 days. Martinez has a compound fracture of the left leg and possible internal injuries. I am ambulatory but hypothermic." Chen felt tears in her eyes as she transmitted back. "Ghost Rider 7, we have search and rescue teams preparing for immediate dispatch. Maintain your current heading and transmit position updates when possible." "Roger Base. Tell command that Ghost Rider 7 is bringing Devil Dog home. We'll see you soon." The transmission ended, leaving Chen staring at her radio in amazement. She immediately called the operations center, then Major Kane, then Command Sergeant Major Morrison. Within minutes, the entire base was mobilizing for a rescue mission that would either save 2 Marines who'd accomplished the impossible or recover the bodies of heroes who died trying. But everyone who heard that final transmission knew the truth. Ghost was alive. Martinez was alive. And they were walking home through sheer determination and the unbreakable bond between Marines who refused to surrender. The mountains that had held their secrets for 4 days were finally ready to give them back. The search and rescue helicopter lifted off at 13:47 hours with Staff Sergeant Henderson aboard as the survival specialist. As they flew toward the coordinates Ghost had transmitted, Henderson briefed the crew on what they might find. "We're looking for 2 Marines who have been walking through mountain terrain for 4 days, he explained over the intercom. "One wounded, one carrying him. They're probably hypothermic, dehydrated, and exhausted beyond normal human limits." The pilot, Captain Rodriguez, had flown enough rescue missions to understand the implications. "Henderson, in your professional opinion, what are their chances?" Henderson considered the question carefully. "Sir, statistically, they should already be dead. But these are Marines, and Marines have a way of making statistics irrelevant when their buddies are involved." As they approached the search area, the door gunner spotted movement below. 2 figures, one supporting the other, moving slowly but steadily across a snow-covered ridge. Even from altitude, their determination was visible in the steady progress they maintained despite obviously desperate conditions. "Base, this is Rescue 1, Rodriguez radioed. "We have visual contact with 2 individuals matching the description, preparing for immediate extraction." The helicopter descended into a swirling cloud of snow and rotor wash, landing on the most level ground available. Henderson jumped out before the skids touched earth, running toward the 2 figures who had accomplished something that would become legend in Marine Corps lore. Ghost looked up as the rescue team approached, her face displaying the particular exhaustion that comes from moving beyond human limitations for an extended period. Martinez was unconscious but breathing, his improvised splint still holding his shattered leg in stable position. "Took you long enough," Ghost said with a weak smile, the first humor she'd allowed herself in 4 days. Henderson knelt beside them, conducting rapid medical assessments while the helicopter crew prepared extraction equipment. "Captain, how the hell did you carry him 30 miles through this terrain?" Ghost looked at Martinez's unconscious face and gave the only answer that mattered. "He's a Marine. Marines don't get left behind." Within minutes, both Marines were aboard the helicopter, receiving emergency medical treatment while flying toward base. Ghost remained conscious throughout the flight, holding Martinez's hand and whispering reassurances to her unconscious companion. "We made it, Devil Dog," she said as the base appeared on the horizon. "We're home." Colonel Webb was waiting on the flight line when the rescue helicopter landed. He watched as the medical team rushed Martinez to the waiting ambulance, then saw Ghost refuse a stretcher and walk toward the base on her own power, supported but not carried. She stopped in front of Webb, came to attention with the precision that 4 days of impossible hardship couldn't eliminate, and rendered a proper salute. "Sir, Captain Blackwater reporting. Mission complete. One Marine recovered and delivered to friendly forces." Webb returned the salute with the respect due to someone who'd just redefined what was possible. "Captain, how did you manage to cover 30 miles carrying wounded through enemy territory?" Ghost's answer would be repeated in Marine Corps training facilities for decades to come. "Sir, Corporal Martinez is a Marine. Marines don't quit and they don't leave other Marines behind. The distance was irrelevant." As Ghost was finally convinced to accept medical treatment, Webb realized he was witnessing something that would become Marine Corps legend. The story of a pilot who'd walked her wounded comrade home through impossible terrain because abandoning him was simply not an option Marines consider. 3 hours later, Major Kane was updating Ghost's personnel file from "killed in action" to "returned to duty pending medical evaluation," when Command Sergeant Major Morrison entered his office with a smile that suggested satisfaction with recent events. "Major, I believe someone owes Captain Blackwater an apology," Morrison said, settling into a chair with the expression of someone who'd been proven correct about an important matter. Kane nodded, still processing the reality of what had happened. "Sergeant Major, I've reviewed every aspect of this situation, and I still don't understand how they survived. The terrain, the weather, the distances involved, it should have been impossible." Morrison's expression grew serious. "Major, you're thinking about this wrong. You're trying to understand it mathematically, but this wasn't about mathematics. This was about Marines taking care of Marines." "But the physical requirements were irrelevant," Morrison interrupted. "Ghost made a promise to bring Martinez home. Marines don't break promises to other Marines, especially when those Marines are wounded and depending on them for survival." Kane stared at the updated personnel file, trying to reconcile the statistics with the reality. "So what you're telling me is that willpower trumped physics?" Morrison stood, preparing to leave. "What I'm telling you, Major, is that you just witnessed why Marines have a reputation for doing impossible things. It's not about individual heroics or exceptional physical capability. It's about the bond between Marines that makes abandoning each other literally unthinkable." After she left, Kane continued studying the file, trying to understand how determination could overcome mathematical impossibility. But perhaps some things weren't meant to be understood analytically. Perhaps some things simply were, because Marines made them so through sheer force of will and unbreakable commitment to each other. In the medical bay, Ghost was receiving treatment for severe hypothermia and exhaustion, while Martinez underwent surgery for his compound fracture. Both Marines would recover completely, but their story would live on in Marine Corps lore as an example of what becomes possible when Marines refuse to accept impossible. Ghost's final report was characteristically brief. Mission: recover wounded Marine. Status: complete. Casualties: none. Marines don't quit. The report would be filed with hundreds of others in the official record, but this one would be different. This one would be remembered, copied, shared, and told in training facilities whenever Marines needed to understand what their commitment to each other really meant. 2 weeks later, Captain Williams was flying routine patrol when she spotted Ghost conducting pre-flight inspections on a new Viper. Ghost had returned to flight status with typical Marine efficiency, treating her 4-day walk through impossible terrain as just another mission requiring completion. Williams landed and walked over to where Ghost was checking weapon systems, with the methodical precision that characterized everything she did. "Ghost, I heard about your walking tour of Afghanistan," Williams said. "Hell of a thing." Ghost looked up from her checklist, expression revealing nothing unusual. "Just brought a Marine home.